this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to the Life Science Success Podcast. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Don Davis. I'm the host of the podcast. And today on this episode, my guest is Farah Ahmad. We are going to dive in just a little bit into Farah's background and things like that. But before we get there, I just wanted to mention really quickly, and I've made this a main part of every episode for the last few weeks. I do have an OKR course that focuses in on helping companies bring in metrics and help your company grow overall in terms of measuring performance and output and things like that. So with that, in this episode of the Life Science Success Podcast, my guest is Farah Ahmad. Farah is the president of Life Sciences at Press Ganey. We're going to discuss her career journey and how Press Ganey is putting the human experience at the heart of healthcare. So with that, welcome, Farah.
Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for being here. I greatly appreciate it. And, so just to get started, can we just have you take a moment to share with the listeners a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So my name is Farah. I have been in the life sciences industry for about 20 years. And I can speak a little bit more about my journey, but I've done various different things, mostly in the clinical development side. I did join Press Ganey about 7 months ago. I had never heard of Press Ganey, so I'd love to take this opportunity to introduce this amazing company that I've joined and I think can make a great impact in our industry. I'm a mom of 3. I do a lot of sports. I do a lot of, making dreams come true with my kids and all the mom stuff. And I am in Montreal. I do work from home and I travel quite a bit for business.
Very good. And I mean, it looked to me like you had figure skating in your background as well. Is that right?
Yes, I'm actually a pro figure skater.
Wow.
And have done that through most of my life. Yes.
It's amazing. It's funny because I used to live in Wisconsin. So I worked for GE Healthcare for a number of years. And then living in Wisconsin, we were right next to the Olympic Training Center there. And so trying to run in the winter time, oftentimes they would take you to the Olympic Training Center to go run, laps around the ice skating rink. So we would see, occasionally we would see the Olympians training and things like that. It was kind of cool to see people that, that were really, really very focused on their craft. So,
it's a great sport, takes a lot of dedication, but it's a great feeling to do. And, as a Canadian, I always say you need to know 3 things. You need to know how to swim, you need to know how to skate, and you need to know how to go camping to fit in.
Very good. Yeah, especially in Montreal. So the one question that I maybe we start with is, tell us a little bit more about your history in terms of, your experience inside of life sciences. Then we'll come back to Press Ganey and we'll spend a fair amount of time there, talking about the company as well.
Sure. So I did study biochemistry at McGill, and that kind of put me in the avenue around kind of the lab sciences. And I did enter into the industry as a study chemist, working at what is now part of Charles River. So I was on the kind of contract research side from the beginning. Really did enjoy being in the lab and working in the bioanalytical department. But did feel this aptitude for working with clients. I did excel in that interaction with clients. And so very soon kind of moved into more of a business development role, went into the clinical space and joined a company that was the predecessor of Syneos Health. I spent about 15 years there and kind of moved up from, frontline sales to middle management to kind of leadership of the global business development team for early phase research, which is basically bioanalysis and phase 1 development. And in my journey on the phase 1 side, I certainly learned a lot about clinical development, and about some of the challenges that the industry lives through every day around recruitment and retention. And that was always, very present in my mind, and thinking like these are challenges that are deeply seated, and it feels like age-old issues. And it always just was curious to me how there was not a better solution to move closer to the healthcare space and partner with patients and other groups like sites to kind of really tackle this challenge together. I did spend about 4 years in the technology and clinical technology, working for a company called Strategicon, and launched their Clinical Maestro study budgeting tool, and then finally joined Press Ganey.
Very good. And then, so Press Ganey. People that listen to the podcast know that I'm from Indiana. Whenever I saw that Press Ganey, was in South Bend, I was like, I didn't know that. And so maybe we should just, tell listeners a little bit about Press Ganey, and then we can kind of dive a little bit deeper into the, how they're bringing the human experience into the heart of healthcare as well.
Sure. So Press Ganey is an amazing organization. I'm just, every day I'm more and more impressed about the capabilities, the skills, the talent that they have. And essentially it was founded by Dr. Press and Dr. Ganey, who determined that there must be a way that they could measure the patient experience, back in the 80s, so kind of 35, 40 years ago. And they began to measure in healthcare systems what the patient experience was, and doing that, developed a lot of knowledge around kind of behavioral analytics, behavioral insights, how to ask questions, how to avoid bias in those questions, and built this amazing business. And at some point, that those surveys became regulated. And actually contribute to a lot of different things that happen in healthcare. And the organization today is embedded in kind of 85 to 90% of health systems in the U.S. We are active in 41,000 hospitals. We annually survey over 40 million patients and 3 million healthcare workers. And we provide a lot of technology and insights around that experience and how that generates knowledge for health systems to improve in order to improve the patient experience. And why is that important? It's important because of loyalty. So, healthcare systems want to retain their patients. They want to exceed their expectations of their time in the hospital. And this is very challenging. It's a very complex environment to excel in, and it's very important to have data and real-time, as close to real-time data, so that we have really the clear picture of what's going on, and very much understand the experience of the healthcare workers, because that impacts the patient experience as well. Press Ganey earlier this year did acquire Forsta, which is a technology platform, very exciting consumer experience technology platform that has provided great capability advancement in terms of modern tool sets and what we call human to technology to human design, so that technology just melts into your experience and you can kind of give your feedback. So putting the human at the center, it sounds very fancy, but it's really very logical. We want to think about the human being, the person, being the source of that data, and how are we doing? Well, you've got to ask, right? And you can't guess. So without asking, you're guessing. And we believe that measurement is key to insights, and those insights can provide great value. So I can give some examples later on, but there's some wonderful case studies that we have on our website, and how we use this data. It really does get to the heart of improving the patient experience, improving the caregiver experience, improving the physician and nurse experience, and these things are all interrelated. And I'm sure you can start to think about how that connects to the life sciences industry.
Yeah, and I mean, so maybe we should talk a little bit about that, right? So, what is the direct tie then, and where would Press Ganey normally, start or interact with life sciences companies?
hmm So I was brought into the organization to lead the entry into the life sciences market. We weren't quite sure what we were going to do, and so we spent quite a bit of time, speaking to prospective clients, biotech and pharma companies, and medical device companies. Watching what the FDA was doing with the DEI draft guidance and the PFDD, the patient focused drug development draft guidance, understanding the organization's capabilities, deep capabilities and expertise and patient experience. And we thought, hey, this is a great opportunity for us to come into this market and bring our expertise and resources to the concept of patient centricity. Can we provide tool sets to sponsors to enable them to have great view of what that patient experience is as it relates to the clinical trial? Can we then enable this data to go very deep to the grassroots level to really kind of demonstrate what are the challenges that certain groups or certain personas or certain individuals face when they are deciding to join a clinical trial or deciding every day to stay in that clinical trial? Retention is a big issue. We see that there's 30% dropout rate. The pipeline, the clinical trial pipeline at large, has grown excessively in oncology studies, rare disease, cell and gene therapy. These are typically complex studies that have very long follow-ups. We don't want to lose those data points. We need to keep those patients retained. It's a staggering cost to the industry. And we think we have a way to enable that view in real time and understand how a patient might be feeling with respect to the experience they've had in the clinical trial and actually predict and catch dropouts before they happen. We also believe that this data can be aggregated at various different levels to serve as a novel site selection tool. Sites are being measured on a couple of different things, and those are pretty traditional. That includes enrollment, past performance. But when we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, we need to start doing things differently, right? To enable underrepresented voices to participate in trials. And we can't just continue to select sites on those same metrics. We'll just continue to select the same sites, the same investigators, and the same patients. So we do think there's a great opportunity to leverage communities and community relationships with patients by introducing a new site selection criteria that is focused on patient experience and patient retention. We're talking about patient centricity so often in the industry, but if we are not measuring it in a standardized way, how do we know if we're improving? So we believe that we can provide that. This is what Press Ganey does, standardize patient experience measures. And we believe we can enable great information on trajectory improvement at the trial level, at the sponsor level, compare that to industry, and provide great insight and direction as to, hey, what do we need to do to actually improve? Where are the friction points, and how can we resolve those?
Yeah, it's the things that come to mind over and over. I mean, so repeatedly on this podcast, we've had conversations with individuals that are talking about having very inclusive trials,
Mm-hmm.
and then we also sort of have explored the CRO space as well, and had deeper discussions about patient dropouts and things like that. And I mean, so to me, the data that you're producing would be very insightful to have, and it's one of the reasons why, and again, people that listen to the podcast frequently, you would know this, that is one of the reasons why I do this, is to try and stay in touch with the industry as well. It's kind of my main way of, sort of reaching out beyond just the customers that I interact with every day, but also just making sure that I know more broadly, what is specifically happening in the industry. So whenever you think about the future and how data will be delivered, do you see, kind of near term shifts happening, or near term kind of exposure happening, to the data that you guys could be producing?
Absolutely. We have the capacity and the technology already available, and I think what is important, and one of the amazing things that we are able to provide with our Forsta platform is actually bringing stories to life. So data, data is you really have to kind of understand what the data is telling you, and that's part of the challenge. We collect so much data in this industry, and what is this data telling us? Well, I think what is really effective is to have tools that visualize that data and kind of bring it together as a story, that can enable you to understand, hey, where exactly do I need to focus? What do I need to focus on? And then use that data and that story to understand what the right solution needs to be at the right time. And I think the concept of having near real time data is actually much needed as well. Today we have dropout data as kind of a lagging metric, and at that time it's probably too late to retain that patient. And so we very much feel that we need to be measuring and asking to know what those problems are. I think we all kind of assume what they are, and we kind of know what they are. But really the best folks to give the direction, and I hear this all the time from sponsors, but how do we change? Really I took this question back to my chief experience officer, and I said, okay, well, we're going to collect this data, we're going to see where the friction points are, we're going to understand which groups are maybe having a more negative experience, based on their personal circumstances, their capacity to take on the workload associated to illness and advancing illness, and the participation in the trial. But how do we know what to do? And the answer is quite logical. You ask, right? You need to ask patients. You need to ask investigators and study coordinators. And this approach actually enables the organization to do that at scale, and it's not hard. It's not expensive, and it's not hard. So my vision is to really make it so simple and so predictable to do this that there's no reason not to do it.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean the thing again that comes to mind as you're describing this is that most clinical trials, as far as I understand, most of the interactivity with patients is that, a lot of companies have apps where they're asking, the patient
Mm-hmm.
different things anyway. And so as a part of that, why not also keep track of their experience? I know, the cell phones that we have today are just amazing, in
Mm-hmm.
terms of, what they can actually do and enable, and let alone, leveraging that plus, what you already have in place, seems like a pretty logical place to get started.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, this would be far more complicated if we were having this conversation 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But with the emergence over the last 3 years of decentralized trial platforms and all this technology, and the fact that the majority of humans on the planet actually have a smartphone, it's an opportunity, right? It's an opportunity to bring empathy and to ask, how are they feeling and how did this interaction go? So you see that on the consumer side. You are buying things on Black Friday, and the places you want to shop are the ones where it's the easiest experience. It's the least amount of effort for you to complete a transaction. We need to kind of learn from that in our clinical industry. If we want more patients to participate, only 5% of patients in the US participate in trials. We have to make it easy for them to do so. And we have to learn, why is it hard? What was hard about it? What was the barrier? How can we fix it? And then take that insight and actually action on it. So, close the loop. So these are things that we are very passionate about at Press Ganey. I personally believe, in possibilities. And I think the other important thing to consider here is it's great for us to ask these questions in isolation. And I know there's a lot of platforms that kind of ask about satisfaction or other types of kind of survey questions, but it's quite important. Like, where does that data go? We need to collaborate in the industry, and we need to be able to measure in a comparable way, relative to something. So we believe that benchmarking is the solution. Does this trial rank on patient centricity versus industry? That's the only way we are going to know whether we are progressing on patient centricity as an industry or stagnating.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, whenever I think about your career as well, I feel like your career almost, led you to this point. And we've had this conversation as well a couple times on the podcast, that I feel almost like, one of the things that as we go through school, let's just maybe start there. So as we go through school, oftentimes you're asked to, what do you want to do in the future and things like that. And I almost feel like your life chooses you instead of you choosing the life that you want. And I feel, as I look at your career and things like that, in terms of somebody that could understand kind of the background of the challenges that you'll have, as well as what the future also might be, I feel like your career, very much led you to this point. Do you feel like that's a correct assumption, or, just curious what your thoughts are?
I think things happen for a reason. And, if I would have, I always have been very curious about kind of customer service, and that is ingrained in my DNA. I am service oriented. I think even if I was in a different industry, I probably would still be in a service role, and in a kind of a role where I talk to a lot of people and I learn. And I think the aspect of curiosity is very is very important. But yeah, I would have never guessed that I would be measuring patient experience. I think I probably in school I probably thought I would work in a lab for my whole life. But I will share a tiny tidbit of personal information. I think when I was about 5 years old in kindergarten, you have to kind of I had to make this poster about kind of your life and what you want to be when you grow up. And I thought of this recently. My son is 6, and he recently had to do that in his grade 1 class. And I had this kind of flashback. I remember what I put, and I had cut this picture of a doctor, but it was carrying a briefcase. So it's almost like I knew I would be something in business and in medicine. But of course, at 5, I had no idea what that exactly would look like. But I think it's amazing, that I'm very fortunate and grateful that I've ended up in this role that I am very passionate about. I think the other thing that's important, and I'm happy to share, I am the daughter of 2 immigrant parents, that worked very hard. Education was very important. Having done a lot of competitive sports, kind of that discipline is very important. But I do think that having, that I am of an ethnic background, and it has enabled me to relate to a lot of different communities. I am an Islamic woman, so I connect with the Muslim community. I am South Asian, half South Asian, so I connect with the Indian and Pakistani community. My mom is German, so I can speak with the Europeans in German. And of course, I'm a francophone. I'm not a francophone. I'm an anglophone, but I live in a francophone province in Quebec here in Montreal. And so, speaking with colleagues and clients in French has really enabled me to kind of connect with a lot of different people at different levels. And I think that is really important in understanding the makeup of our North American communities today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and all these different perspectives definitely, will help in terms of, gathering those, the different sort of thought processes that you need in terms of complete inclusion, as well. And how is that gathered? Which brings me to my next question. So what are some of the biggest challenges you face in life sciences at Press Ganey?
So I think one of the biggest challenges that I'm working through, Press Ganey, as I mentioned before, a really special company, very cool culture, but has been deeply embedded in the healthcare industry for very long. Now there's a lot of change happening. It's not, it's not your father's Press Ganey, as we like to say. There's a lot of transition. We used to be known as a survey company, and that's very much still what we do. You go into the hospital in the U.S., you receive care. 9 times out of 10, you're going to get a survey from Press Ganey, and that is kind of what we're known for. But there's so much more that Press Ganey is into today around kind of data aggregation and distribution and transparency and various different areas. A lot of really cool technologies. Now we're super present in the consumer experience market. The human experience is really what we're all about. So we have some very interesting accounts: Nike, Disney, Pampers, so we're kind of working globally with other industries, and life sciences is no exception to that. So I think the part of the reason why I wanted to join this podcast is really to share all the terrific things that Press Ganey is able to do, and the capabilities, and introduce Press Ganey into the life sciences market. So that's part of the challenge. Is we are working on our visibility. We do believe we are, have a great position to help solve some of these patient centricity and DEI challenges in the industry, and would like to work as much as possible, especially next year, to increase our visibility and share some of the amazing evidence we have around these challenges.
Very good. And then where do you think the biggest opportunities lie for Press Ganey as well?
Yeah, so I do think the measurement of the patient experience as it pertains to the clinical trial is definitely the largest and most meaningful opportunity. We also do see an opportunity for consolidation from a platform approach of patient feedback. We do see large organizations, speaking to patients in various different places for various different reasons: market research, branding, kind of opportunity identification, learning about unmet needs, clinical development, patient engagement, and all this data we feel is kind of going into silos. There's an opportunity to take a platform approach, consolidate that patient feedback with technology, and enable organizations to actually share internally and leverage insights that that probably already exist in their organization somewhere else. So I think enabling that kind of cross-pollination is a second opportunity. But the overarching thing in general, we see that the industry is quite challenged by the DEI challenge. So that is a new draft guidance that FDA has put out some time ago. We applaud that. I personally am very, very happy that we have this guidance now. And I think this presents a massive challenge and opportunity for the industry at large. So, how do we move the dial? And I think that is really the overarching umbrella around both clinical and commercial applications. And then if I can add one more thing, our vision is to really enable more transparency in the industry. So we talked about that kind of 5% of patient participation. There's 3% of physicians that are participating in trials. So these numbers are really low, and they need to improve, they need to increase. So one of the things that I believe could happen, and we do offer these platforms in our healthcare business, is to enable patients to actually rate and review their trial experience publicly. So it feels very scary to do that. But that is really how we are going to demystify the process, bring it into the public sphere, and enable change. So we see today, if you're going to go to a restaurant, Don, what are you going to do? You're going to check Yelp, right? You're going to check Open Table. What are the ratings? What are the reviews? If you are picking a doctor, you're going to do the same thing. So that really is where the industry needs to go to change some of these massive challenges. And I think we are poised to enable that. I was at the DIA in June, and we were talking about this, very issue on one of the talks. And one of the Parexel leaders actually stood up and shared this story that they were approaching a community hospital looking to engage with the community of patients that they had in a very diverse community. The CEO of that hospital reflected that diverse community, and they sat down with him and they, had a conversation. And the fellow said, hey, as much as the community may trust me, they're going to trust their neighbor more than they're going to trust me. And that's the world we live in. So, we can't really fight against this current. We need to swim in that direction as well.
Yeah, I think, just, and for our listeners, right? I mean, I continually tie these talks to other talks that I've had, on the podcast. And so whenever I'm thinking through, like where Press Ganey is and where you want to tie, the one thought that keeps coming back to mind for me, one is, so Valid Care has this clinical digital CRO platform. So they have an app where they're kind of interacting with with patients already, as a part of their clinical trials. So that tie, to me kind of brings, potentially you two together. And then secondly, Semalytics. So Yannick Jasklowski in Germany, he has he's the CEO of Semalytics, and he has a platform where they essentially go out to the internet to see what people are saying about clinical trials. Oh, I woke up this morning and have a headache for the third time, and I'm taking this, clinical trial drug. Maybe they're not submitting information on a survey, and they're gathering information. So again, I could see there's some level of a synergy here as well. And so happy to sort of work with you to put you together as well. So to kind of conclude, there are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest, though, Farah. What inspires you?
I think possibility of changing the future inspires me, even when it's hard. And actually, especially when it's hard. That is really, what gets me going.
Very good. Can you expound just a little bit more? Like, give me an example.
Yeah. So, I kind of perhaps developed this persona of being, an underdog in various different facets of my life growing up. And I think I thrived on that, kind of under expectation of me and kind of, beating that expectation and trying to keep a low profile and remain focused on, how to advance. And so I think that that really has enabled me to gain some good skill from a business perspective. Most wonderful ideas are not easy to implement, or they would have already been done. And so I think it does create this pathway where you keep your head down, and you ask as many people as possible. And if people say, hey, this is impossible, rather than hearing that it's impossible, well, maybe I need to tweak a little bit so it's a little more possible. And you just continue to iterate on that until you get to the strategy that is a winner.
Yeah, I love that example, and let me tell you why. So I mean, and I've mentioned it on a previous episode. So I had somebody come to me with regards to the podcast and just say, look, to be somebody that's successful in life sciences, you must be a god, was the word. And it really stuck in my head, because it's like, if you really listen to any of the podcast episodes, you won't hear people sort of say, I'm great, I'm wonderful. Instead, it's like, look, here's the work that I want to do to deliver something into life sciences. And hopefully this is a platform for people to leverage for that. But then again, you also sort of know that there's a natural resistance in this industry for certain things that everybody has to encounter. And also
Mhm.
we have to work through it. And it's just the way that, to me, this is what life science success is. It's like this idea of, look, we could see a cancer cure somewhere in the future. And as a part of that, we're going to make a lot of pivots and we're going to fail a
Yeah.
lot. But as a part of it, we're also going to hopefully save a lot of lives and extend a lot of lives in the process. And so that's kind of where at least my head goes whenever you give that example. Hey, look, you set a pretty tough goal for yourself, but at the same time pivot along the way and continue to forge forward. So thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think I mean, focus goes a long way. All we can be is better than we were yesterday. And that's really the way forward. There's only a few things you can actually really accomplish in a meaningful way. And it's important to kind of keep those priorities very crisp in front of you and, just keep plowing towards that target. And I think, great example is what this industry achieved during COVID. That was an amazing, and I was never so proud to be part of life sciences as during that journey.
Yeah. Thank you. Then what concerns you?
I think what concerns me probably has connotations for society at large. This, and I do have two teenage daughters, so I do see that is this kind of environment and technology that's very kind of self-fulfilling, and it almost creates more more introverts in society, and I think that has a lot of risk, because it does kind of dull our senses a little bit towards empathy, right? Towards reading people's face and body language, and getting out of your comfort zone to actually speak to more people. That's how we learn. So I do hope that people kind of look up from their devices and take that opportunity to speak with people they would not normally speak with, and gain ideas, and expand their thinking. It's great that we have conferences back kind of live. I think that is in person. I think that hopefully will encourage people to kind of think outside the box and learn from individuals that perhaps they never thought to speak to before. So I do think that that is what I'm concerned about. And I do think that there is a connection to what we're talking about here, kind of speaking to patients, speaking to caregivers, speaking to sites, understanding the real challenges and kind of really listening to the challenges from different perspectives, and iterating to find that kind of win-win, that symbiotic relationship where we can all thrive.
Yeah. Yeah, no, again, so it's to think through recent interviews for me. So Gary McCausland just came back and was interviewed because ACGT Vector is a CDMO in Ireland, and they're
Mm-hmm.
developing the capability to manufacture drugs right next to a hospital, primarily because of things like CAR T cell therapies and
Yeah.
things like that, because the supply chain's so long. How do you shorten the supply chain? Well, maybe move the supply chain next to where the hospitals are, right? Would be one way. And I just think of, so, to kind of go through a little bit of this, for people that may not know it, these therapies are oftentimes delivered to end stage cancer patients, so they're out of options. And in addition to that, having your immune system depleted for 40 something days while your T cells are sent off and then sent back wouldn't be that comfortable to have to go through. So that, I mean, to me, that empathetic approach, but then also your point about looking at your devices. So it's kind of funny. I've recently, as well, been having a lot of conversations with people about being purposeful in your life. Around the behind me, there's a copy of my book over my head. So it's a book on just over commitment and this idea that, hey, look, I mean, oftentimes we do things that oftentimes don't enable us to move in the direction that we wanted to go in. And so, that's more or less central to the same idea that, if you're going to be staring at your device, hopefully you're doing it, to interact with somebody that you want to interact with, and not ignoring people that are around you either. So it's important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're all humans, that's what connects us. So I think there's great opportunity, to use those devices to have greater interconnectivity. But there's provided it does not replace kind of the real life connections, right? That you can learn from. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. And then lastly, what excites you?
So I think what excites me, I love team dynamics. I love getting folks riled up and motivated. I often would ask my teams, take the sports analogy. I played a lot of soccer growing up, or let's say football. Who's the most important player on the soccer team? Or World Cup is on. I'll ask that question, and people will say, well, it's the keeper, right? It's the striker. Actually, there is no one most important player. You need a team, right? Everybody has a job to do. If I'm going to pass the ball to my teammate, I need to know that they're going to take that ball and run with it. And I think that is so important. And it really excites me to kind of build teams that are united for a cause. And it's amazing what a team of very motivated people can do together. And I'm, very fortunate to work with a lot of talented people at Press Ganey, both within the life sciences team and elsewhere, kind of in our patient experience and consumerisms groups. And I'm just so excited about what we will be able to do as we gel as a team.
Yeah, I also am excited for the future of what this could be, right? I mean, that's the thing, and I absolutely would, love to sort of continue to hear, updates in terms of, where things are at. On my side, I mean, just for anybody that's trying to leave a comment, online, I just wanted to mention really quickly, it looks to me like there's some sort of an error loading comments. I'm not exactly sure what that is, but I do see, by the way, that we have 8 people currently online on LinkedIn that are checking out, the episode here. Not sure how many are equally on YouTube at the same point in time, but just wanted to mention that really quickly. Great. So Farah Ahmad, thank you so much for being a guest on the Life Science Success Podcast. I greatly appreciate you being here and sharing everything that's going on with Press Ganey and everything that you're working on. And I do, look forward to seeing more of what the team can deliver as well.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Don. It's been great. What a great way to start my Wednesday morning here. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and looking forward to continuing to follow your podcast.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.